Wind howled through the trees of Clifton, Virginia. The cold night air carried a special kind of chill, not just because it was Halloween of all dates, but from the forces of chaos and evil that were about to come crashing into each other. Despite all the warnings, all the signs and instinct telling them to stay away, a pair of legend trippers found themselves at the Colchester overpass, hoping to catch a glimpse of something unreal. They should have been more careful with what they wished for. Their car slowed to a halt as they approached the maw of the tunnel. "Oh, come on, don't tell me you're chickening out already," said the young male, eyeing his companion who didn't seem so eager to visit the overpass as they were originally. I don't know, something just seems wrong with this place. Can we just get out of here, please? Hell no. It took us 3 hours to drive all the way down here. I'm not leaving yet just because you're a little scared. It's just before midnight. That's when something's supposed to happen, right? If you want to wait in the car, that's fine. But I'm going to take a look around. The boy's proud expression changed to uncertainty as he stared off into the dark night. Do you hear that? Quit messing around. No, for real. That sound. Just... what is that? The boy said to himself, stepping out of the car, much to his partner's dismay. As if his legs had a mind of their own, he wandered towards the overpass, becoming lost in the brush as he stepped off the road and began climbing the hill up to the tracks. Too scared to leave the safety of the vehicle herself, the girl shouted for him to please return. He said nothing, continuing to climb with only moonlight guiding him to the top. But the girl's voice didn't go unanswered for long. As fate would have it, a patrol car was making its round, intent on tracking something they were ultimately ill-prepared to deal with. This damned place again, the patrolman thought to himself with dread, knowing the overpass's stain of bloody history that even time itself couldn't wash away. He pulled up behind the couple's car with haste, hoping to prevent history from repeating itself again like it had many times in the past. The policeman hurried up the hill after the boy, barely able to illuminate them with his flashlight. The young man was now standing on the overpass. Train tracks ran under his feet, which seemed to stretch indefinitely in either direction, their lay dividing the overgrowth like an old and scarred suture. Before the policeman could reach the tracks himself, he came to notice a bright light on the far end of the horizon behind him, getting ever brighter as it made its way down the tracks towards them. No doubt the light of an oncoming train, but in place of its signature horn, the distant wind instead carried a sort of menacing cackle. Train or no, it was apparent the boy needed to be removed from the area before they got hurt. But in shining his own flashlight on the boy, the policeman saw the real source of danger standing just behind him. A figure of incredible size, with grisly muscles hidden beneath matted brown fur. Clutched in their hand was some bladed instrument, an axe of sorts, its edge glistening red from recent slaughter. This was no bear, and certainly no man. Atop the giant's head rested a set of horns that spiraled into jagged points, giving him an appearance like the devil himself had come to Clifton. The boy gazed into the beguiling eyes of the beast who towered over him, as transfixed by their ominous aura as they were paralyzed with fear, like a helpless mouse caught in the gaze of a fierce snake. With no wind-up needed, the brute cleaved the poor boy clean through the middle, their resulting halves falling to the ground and leaving the stunned girl and policeman in a state of pure shock. The patrolman's mind raced as they failed to remember in time the approaching light that was by now only a few meters behind. He turned to flee, but suddenly found himself frozen in place. A cold and sudden wind rushed past him, leaving a thin red line that encircled his neck. Almost as quickly as the line appeared, the officer's head found itself detached from body, both falling to the ground as the source of the ominous light finally approached the already gruesome sight.
End of the line, officer.
The light was not from any train, but rather a lantern held by an almost equally unbelievable character. A grown man clad in the guise of an Easter bunny, ears and all, brandishing an axe of their own in the opposite hand. Finally, these monsters met. For a moment, the air of the night was still, as if holding its breath. The girl in the car, too, held her breath in a stunned silence before letting out an ear-piercing scream. Both killers could hear her clearly, but neither shifted their attention away from the other, both standing so boldly that for anything to stand against them would be considered an act of war. Their battle was about to begin. The Goatman made the first move, lunging forward and striking at the Bunnyman with more than double the strength used on the young man a moment before, but he did not hit his target. Just as swiftly, the costumed madman threw his lantern to the ground, shattering it into a few bright, ghostly embers before being consumed by the encroaching shadows. It was in the moment of darkness that the target ceased to remain, replaced by a sudden strong wind that blew around the Goatman and left shallow, bloody slash marks along his body. A counterattack hampered somewhat by the unexpected toughness of the Goatman's exterior.
You shouldn't have come here.
The Bunnyman called out from the darkness behind before a steel hatchet followed in suit, racing through the air towards the Goatman. It was caught with ease. Reflexes came naturally to the ex-freak show performer. In retaliation, the lower half of the recently slain were hurled in the direction of the voice, which splattered against the tree and sent viscera in every direction. The terrified onlooker was in no mood to watch the spectacle unfolding before her, but her attempts to escape by car were halted by the patrolman's vehicle blocking the narrow road directly behind her. As she struggled to maneuver around it without getting caught in the thick brush on either side, a loud and jarring crash on the squad car brought her attempt to an immediate halt. It was the body of the policeman, thrown with enough force to shatter the squad car's windshield and down its light bar. No longer wanting to take her chance going around the police car, in a panic, the young woman floored it forward into the tunnel, the Lover's Lane slashers still battling on the tracks above. Salvation was nearly in sight as the girl neared the other side of the tunnel, only for the twisted and terrible reality of the situation to come crashing back quite literally as the Goatman himself dropped down from above the tunnel's exit, landing on the hood of the car and bringing it to a complete stop. The impact left the poor girl in a daze. It made no difference as in seconds the Goatman reached around the car and with a yank of tremendous force he wrenched the driver's side door clean off its hinges. The Goatman didn't actually care about claiming her as a victim, not at the moment anyway. He was more preoccupied with his current conflict, procuring the door to use as a makeshift shield, which soon came in handy as other bladed objects flew out of the darkness, embedding themselves in the steel. The Goatman once more charged into the night, having a clear sight of his ghostly opponent. The young woman only cared about getting to safety, and once again she was made to turn and flee in the other direction. As she stumbled back through the tunnel, the glow of her tail lights bathed the walls in red. Echoes of laughter, animal screams, and the clashing of metal could be heard all around her. The laughter seemed to get louder as well, drowning out all other noise. The walls of the enclosure appeared to shift before her somewhat delirious eyes and spin like the vortex funnel of a funhouse. This madness culminated in something suddenly and forcefully clotheslining the girl just before she could exit the tunnel. Looking up, she saw it was the remains of her friend's torso, strung up in the tunnel's entryway by rope. It took a moment for her to collect that this wasn't some illusion like the spinning walls before. The blood dripping from the body, the blood left on her from the impact she made with said body, still warm as she felt it. This was all too real. Crawling on all fours, she clambered along the cold and dirty asphalt, making her way out of the tunnel before reaching an unfamiliar obstacle. A pair of feet, clad in pinkish faux fur, the source of the laughter, was standing before her. The Bunnyman haunched over the poor girl in delight, intending to toy with her a little more before finishing her off, but his fun didn't last. The costume figure ducked down as something large came zooming past overhead, before crashing to the ground and skidding behind them. Judging by the sound, it was the stolen car door being hurled with great force. Back in the tunnel emerged the door's pitcher, their vague silhouette a bit more haggard than before. Blood visibly ran from them onto the ground as they walked with labored but determined steps. The look in their eyes was unlike any other, conveying anger, hatred, disgust. They stared down the source of their ire as they continued forward.
Why won't you just die like the rest?
The Bunnyman called out to them in annoyance, flinging their weapon towards them. Even in their bloodied state, the beast caught this blade too and proceeded to effortlessly hack their way through the strung-up remains at the tunnel entrance. The Juggernaut marched on towards their opponent.
First you trespass into my home, then you make a fool out of me? Now you're really gonna get it!
Showing a greater extent of what tricks he had up his sleeves, the large rabbit motioned, and out of the darkness above came ropes that wriggled and writhed, wrapping around the Goatman and entrapping him like a critter caught in a snare. The ropes made themselves taut, pulling the Goatman off the ground and up into the night. Now in the trees above the tracks, the Goatman violently struggled, swinging and shaking, snapping rope and branch alike until freeing himself and falling to the ground below. Despite the situation, they still managed to land on their feet, uninjured by the fall, a feat they were accustomed to. Now on the familiar and bloody tracks, another bright light made itself visible on the far end where the Bunnyman had originally emerged. This one, however, was accompanied by a whistle. It hollered loudly into the night as a locomotive charged forward with unnatural speed. Pulled by sinister forces, not even the conductor could slow down. As the sight came into view, more malign ropes shot out of the darkness on either side of the track, entwining themselves around the goat's arms to hold him in place, right in the path of the oncoming train.
If axes and knives won't do you in, how about 100 tons of speeding steel?
The Bunnyman jeered playfully, plainly in view but just out of arm's reach from their captive. The Bunnyman cackled with glee as the light became blinding, the train's roar deafening, the train itself surging across the overpass. But like the Goatman's attack that originally kicked off the battle, the train did not hit its target. The roar of the train masked the snapping of rope. The Goatman ripped through his restraints like twine and narrowly dodged the one-way ticket to the grave. Completing this motion, he lunged forward and snatched the Bunnyman by his scrawny neck. The Bunnyman swung wildly as he was lifted off the ground. Before the grip tightened, he limply dropped his weapon with an angered wheeze.
What are you?
He managed to squeak out, barely audible over the noise of the train that still raced past them. Without a second's thought, the Goatman used his might to force his wily opponent against it like a grindstone, one hand around their neck and the other against their back. Their flailing limbs were the first to go, each passing car cleaving off fur and flesh before reaching bone and taking those too. The train finally finished its pass. What remained in the Goatman's grasp was little more than a bloodied pink rag that used to resemble an Easter bunny. The remains of its wearer were now a mulch of sinew strewn across the overpass, and a red stripe freshly painted along the train's side. In triumph, the Goatman turned his attention down the road. The girl familiar was making a clean escape. She was nearly 40 feet away now. The Goatman calmly reached down to retrieve the previously discarded axe. Even in the blackness of the night, he could see her perfectly in the distance, and with one decent pitch, he sent the blade in her direction. The blade hit its target, dead center.
Another string of bodies were found in the vicinity of the Colchester overpass earlier this morning. The number of victims involved is indeterminate due to the state they were left in, but early forensics are estimating at least half a dozen.
Federal forces have set up roadblocks all along Springfield and other neighboring cities. Extensive searches of the tracks in nearby woods have only served to turn up more deceased. Authorities are declaring a state of emergency, and citizens are being evacuated until the situation can be resolved. Just who or what is responsible for these unspeakable crimes?
Maybe next year we can play again, tough guy.